No one goes to Hank's for his spreadsheets. They go for a darn good pizza. Lately, though, the shop's been quiet, so Hank decides to bring back the $1 slice. He asks Copilot in Microsoft Excel to look at his sales and costs and help him see if he can afford it. Copilot shows Hank where the money's going and which little extras make the dollar slice work. Now Hank has a line out the door. Hank makes the pizza, Copilot handles the spreadsheets. Learn more at m365copilot.com/work.
Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
When you're taking on the tough jobs, gear up with Venom steel gloves and defend your hands from grime, grease, and muck. They're 70% thicker than common disposable gloves with heavy-duty 2-layer nitrile protection, including a black outer layer and a white inner layer that provides chemical and rip resistance. Great for all your painting, plumbing, automotive, and DIY projects.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. When Yara finds themselves in conversation with God about a particular hit job he would like them to undertake, this will not be nearly the weirdest thing that will happen to them in the journey that will follow this somewhat unwilling anointment. Adrena, on the other hand, cannot abide waiting for God's choosing, and so elects herself as prophet and hand of God, rushing to strike down Dominic, the leader of a quite badly behaved army. Fate and force will bring these two on a collision course that looks to detonate at Dominic's feet in Canon, the much-anticipated debut novel of poet Paige Lewis. Canon reads like a religious text that has been swallowed up by a classic epic and then ejected into a very contemporary moment with all the light and force of something new and untethered from tradition or obligation. Yara can ride to Dominic's castle with a whale that has a seat atop his back, as long as they don't mind applying sunscreen. And Adrena will have to convince Harpo, leader of the putative good guys, that she is the main character of this hero story. With intertexts enough to fill a library, Paige Lewis's hero's journey picks and chooses which tropes and recognizable figures best serve the weight and sometimes ridiculousness of Canon's dual hero odyssey. Jonah's whale is cast aside while we wave at a departing Helen of Troy, and Jacques Cousteau makes a rebirthed appearance. And that doesn't begin to capture the carnivalesque array of classical and modern figures, none of whom gets to fully occupy the stage, as room is required for Canon's upstart heroes. Innovative at every level of form and function, reading Canon is like turning the history of the contemporary novel upside down to shake out the cobwebs and prepare ourselves for the funniest oracle-voiced narrator since Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses. Paige Lewis is the author of the poetry collection Space Struck and the novel Canon. They co-edited Another Last Call, Poems on Addiction and Deliverance, with Kaveh Akbar. Paige teaches creative writing at the University of Iowa. Welcome to Burned by Books, Paige Lewis.
Hello, thank you for having me. That was such a nice description of the book.
Thank you.
I would like it to be transcribed so that I can just bring that with me when I have to do readings of it.
Well, you're very kind, because it was really hard to sum it up because it's epic in all the senses of that term. I just took such great joy from this book, and we'll talk about all the reasons why. But in order to just have any sense of what is going on in the form and function of canon, I would love for you to just start by reading a section when Yara has been told by God that they need to fight Dominic, a much maligned warrior.
Yeah, of course. So that happens super early on in the book because we got to just hit the ground running. And so in the previous section, God has asked Yara to fight a bad guy. And the next section starts with the title, What? What? Yara asked. Under his breath, God reminded himself to be crystal clear. Humans didn't respond well to oracular, vague declarations. Eve ate poison. Samson stopped working out. Abraham just about cut his son's fucking head off. God wanted to say, nothing nods to nothing, grave to grave. But what would that mean to this 18-year-old? Humans, especially young ones, need utmost clarity. Okay, Yara, here's the deal. There's this bad guy. Well, there are a lot of bad guys, but you only need to help me with one. His name is Dominic, and I can tell by the way you stopped breathing that you recognize the name. Take a breath, Yara. Yara breathed. Dominic, the general who burned the Sibyllines' books? That's the one. Dominic, who felled the sacred tree? Yeah. And he only tips waitresses 8%. Listen, I need Dominic defeated like yesterday, and you're just the woman I need to take him down. But I'm not a woman. Yara spoke as if offering an apology, though part of them hoped the revelation would disqualify them from carrying out God's mission. It sounded like a huge disruption to their daily routine, and their routine was paramount. Close enough, God thought. Dominic would still be humiliated. He decided not to say this out loud. What did he say instead? Sometimes, even divine plans need tweaking. I have chosen you, Yara, and I stand by this choice. If you accept your mission, you will soon travel across the known world, facing challenges meant to prepare you for your ultimate purpose. Clarity, God thought. What I mean is, by the end of your journey, you will have the physical and mental strength to do what no other human can do. By the end of this journey, you will be able to take Dominic's life. God's voice crumpled silence into a ball. There was a sudden blur to everything, and Yara was certain that to speak again would be a grave mistake. Yet, they spoke. Will I survive? Careless is the ant who takes its eyes off the path to examine the size of its burden, God proclaimed. It wasn't his best quote. He preferred his whole, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb bit, but he was still proud and made a mental note to repeat it. God moved closer to Yara and placed his hand on their head. Yara didn't like this. Sure, God was God, but he was also man adjacent, and his touch felt like any other man's touch. Filthy. It is time to decide. Will you fight for me? God asked, his filthy hand still heavy on Yara's skull.
Thank you so much. It was so great to hear it in your voice. I had to mute myself to keep from laughing at my favorite lines, which included, it wasn't his best quote. He preferred his whole, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb bit. But he was still proud, which I thought was just an amazing turn there. And, for me, one of the most appealing things about Canon is that you managed quite a magic trick in which you have an affect that feels both antiquitous and modern, religious and secular, and epic and vulgar. And I spent the novel feeling like I was reading an epic religious tale while being shown a mirror to our very contemporary moment.
Mm-hmm.
How did you manage that kind of balance in bringing forth and producing the affect of that feeling?
That's a good question, and not one that I know that I can answer because I'm still trying to figure out if it is working. And
It's working.
I'm glad it's working for you. I think that part of the thing with the sort of, the whole God bit, right? Like the sort of
the God bit, yes,
of God, and also the fact that he does not act as the sort of like Abrahamic God would behave, and he acts more like a sort of Greek god in that he has flaws and he gets like he can be silly or he can be very, very angry for a reason we don't understand. And I didn't want to necessarily be making fun of the God that my mother believes in, if that makes sense. And so I feel like he is very much a different character than that God. And that made it a little bit easier for me to have fun with this sort of being that is trying to move all of these chess pieces at once. And it just made it more fun to try to shove Greek god-like being into a world that I remember growing up in. And so I don't know if that answers your question at all.
It does very much. I mean, were you worried? I mean, I guess you were a little bit, but were you worried about feeling blasphemous?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you were. Okay. How did you take that? Because I do feel, I mean, this particular god of Canon does feel like a god, a classical god. But it also, feels enough like an Abrahamic god. And then maybe also, throw in a couple of other traditions. So
Right.
is it helpful that it's a sort of melange of gods and that kind of gets you a little bit off the hook? And what does it what does it mean to kind of have a god who's like deeply imperfect in a way that could offend some people?
Yeah, I think that when I first started writing it, I was writing it as an epic poem, and God showed up really, really quickly in that poem and was as flawed as he is in the book. And for a little while, I was writing it without expecting to show it to anyone. I didn't I showed my husband the first few sections and then didn't show anyone, including him, for the next several years.
Oh, wow.
So part of me was like, okay, cool. So I can do what I want in this book because no one's going to see it. So no one can get upset with me or want to sort of find me and yell at me or anything like that. And so I think that helped a lot with releasing some of that pressure and to sort of dissuade that fear for me. And then when I ultimately did show it to a few readers, I definitely picked readers that weren't easily offended. But from what I heard from them, it didn't seem like it was too outrageous or something that would upset someone like my mother.
It's always good not to upset one's mother.
I know. That's the big thing about it. You're like, okay, I got to write this thing, but if my mom reads it, she'll like me.
And moms always read it. Is the
they
thing.
have to. They it's like it's impossible for them not to read it.
Yep. And as you were talking about this, I was thinking about, also having to balance so many kind of references, both explicit and much more subtle, to all these different epic and religious traditions. And so we've got Rosy Fingered Dawn, coming in there, and references to Helen of Troy and Enkidu, which we don't often see in contemporary literature. And, Jonah and the whale, Odysseus's sirens. I could go on and on. How did you decide what you wanted there? Was it a question of things that you loved or things that you wanted to take on? And how did you make it all live within this world?
Yeah, I teach creative writing classes, and I often ask my students early on what they are obsessed with. And they have such weird obsessions, which is great, but it's sort of to get them thinking about the fact that, like, even if they don't want to write about those obsessions, the obsessions are going to come through eventually in the work.
I love that. I've never heard that expressed that way before, but I think it's so true.
It's so hard to not to stop it. And so I have for a long time now been really obsessed with epic poems. I just find them very fun to read, and there's a sense of clarity to the narrative often that just keeps me feeling calm. It doesn't feel like I have to reach too far to understand what is happening. And so I spent a lot of time reading as many epics as I could find. And being a writer, I would often highlight or like write down certain images from those epics or quotes from those epics. And at first, I didn't know what I was necessarily going to do with those. I just would want them on hand in case I needed to pull from them for like a poem I was writing. And so it ended up being really useful when writing Canon because I had had so much time and energy spent on these epics. My husband likes to tell people that I can like sit down with an epic and then I don't get up until it's done, which isn't true. I definitely get up because I would have to eat, right? Like, and it's I need to like drink water. But so I think that I was pulling from those notebooks. And then when I was really in the weeds of Canon, what I was reading when I wasn't writing was more epics. And so it was really easy for me to pull things that to me felt like they fit in the narrative of Canon. And sometimes maybe it works and sometimes it doesn't. I was told early on as a writer that if I like publish a book, never to check Goodreads. It's really good. Is really good advice. But then I definitely did.
You just broke it immediately.
I definitely checked, and someone was like, "Too many references." For Canon, I was like, "All right." But
no, I stand against this fully. It seems like it was written by Dominic as a way to get back.
He's like, I can't believe that I was written like this. But it makes me think of like reading something like Ulysses and being like too many references. Not that I'm comparing Canon to Ulysses, but Ulysses is also an epic, and so
yeah, very much.
And so it's just funny to think of like what other people's tastes are and what they expect from a book that they're picking up. And so I can't win them all.
This episode is brought to you by Ultima Replenisher. Health is all about balance, like a salad with fries. So why not have balance in your hydration? With 6 essential electrolytes and no junk, Ultima provides balanced hydration you can enjoy every day. That means no sugar, calories, or carbs, and it's not loaded with sodium. Just delicious plant-based flavors you'll actually look forward to drinking. Shop Ultima on Amazon or in-store at Target and Whole Foods Market.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me a break, give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Give me a break, give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. That chocolate crispy taste gonna make your day. And wherever you go, you'll hear the people say, give me a break, give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat. You set the table, put on a playlist, even made the lasagna from scratch. And now you're wearing it. OxyClean Max Force Spray tackles tough, set-in stains the first time. Adulting is hard. Fighting stains shouldn't be. OxyClean Max Force. It's not clean unless it's OxyClean.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But I'm so glad that it follows the Ulysses path in its many, many references. Have you read Maria Zuccola's book, Helen of Troy, 1997?
Yes. It's so good.
Yeah.
I wrote a blurb for it.
Oh, you did? Oh, amazing. Oh, great.
It was so thrilling to read that, and I remember exactly where it was when I was reading it. And just like, I was like, damn it. Someone's already doing this very cool thing that I would love to also do. But the story is just so different in that book.
Yeah.
So wonderful.
Yeah, she was on the show and a great interview, and also came to our literary festival. And
amazing!
She was fabulous, and she just, I think, the two of you need to like be fast friends because your shared obsession with epic things is you'll have a lot to talk about.
Well, and just like moving them into the like contemporary, like the here and now, or at least into the 90s.
Yes,
which is in my mind is the best time. The 90s were great.
At least better than now, but that's that's a low bar.
No, well, and it's just that thing of like you look back and you have that nostalgia, and I'm like, what do I have nostalgia for? Like walking through a Florida mall? Like what? What is that? So it's just that is the that is like peak for me as 90s because it's all I knew.
Hmm. Our guide to this epic is a narrative voice that makes itself known in the chapter headings. The voice is wry and sarcastic, hilarious, and blasphemous. Many times, the voice is even a narrative accelerant, telling the reader to keep up, keep things moving, and also to remind us of our own humanity, forbidding us from knowing and seeing everything of the violence in the story. How do you see the narrator? As a character, a god voice, something in between?
Yeah, I think about the narrator as a sort of god, or at least someone that is more in control than anyone else in the book. Yet they still can't control everything. But I hate titles. I hate writing titles. And so
But these are so great. The chapter titles are, I have "ha" written next to so many of them.
That's
It's kind
amazing.
of embarrassing.
No, that's great. I'm glad that they're working. It was something when I was just writing like short, like 1-page poems. The worst part for me always was the title. And so I sort of challenged myself with this project. I was like, oh, if I hate writing titles, how will I do writing like hundreds of titles for each very short section of this book? And so I think there's a little bit of snark that comes in from the voice of the narrator that might be partly just me being frustrated with having to write titles, and also my being frustrated with the expectations of what like a plot or a through line is.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to not necessarily cut corners, but to almost like relate to a reader. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this list anymore, so I'm going to move on. And that will be the title, and that lets us know that we're moving on from the previous section into something new, and partly because our narrator got bored. And it just felt like a lot of fun to do that. And I also think that I am someone who deeply would love control. And I don't have it because none of us have control. Everything feels very chaotic, especially right now. And so to have a narrator that could in some ways like have control over the god of the story even felt very cool and maybe a little blasphemous. And so it felt a little bit like it grounded me, especially because I've never worked on something this long before. And so having those moments of pause for the narrator to come through and maybe let us know something that we might be missing or to sort of question us and our need for violence.
I was gonna ask you because the some of the most profound moments for me in the book were the narrator basically exposing a reader's desire for explicitness. Like, you want to look at the body and its dismemberment, and we're not going to do that.
Right.
And I wondered that there's a kind of moral and ethical capacity to the voice, and I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that part of that comes from my being frustrated with violence in other people's books or in movies. It's not something that I handle really well as a reader. And it's frustrating to think that this is what will win over a reader, or what will keep a reader interested and continue reading. And so I think that part of the questioning the reader and sort of turning to face them and maybe scolding them a little bit is not only meant to scold the reader, but to scold me as the writer for putting us in the situation to begin with, because I'm still grappling with that, like having the control as the author to put characters in situations that aren't necessarily great or safe, and then letting them figure their way out of those situations. There's that really famous quote that I don't think is actually attributed to anyone. Like people say it's like Mark Twain or Nabokov, but it's just a kind of anonymous quote. But it's, to be like a writer, you need to get your character up a tree, and then once he's there, to throw rocks at him. Um,
That does sound like Twain to me. That sounds
it
very Twain.
yeah. And so, like, I don't think that I'm throwing rocks at
No.
my characters while they're up a tree, but I do
Well,
think
Adrena can just sing them out of existence before they
exactly
get to
before
her.
they even yeah. And I think that the violence isn't. I think that the violence is realistic. Like the pain that the characters suffer is pain that like a reader would have reference for, like loss of beloved or being abandoned by family members or like seeing an animal harmed, right? I think that there's a way in which those are very realistic sufferings. And it would feel very unreal or fake even to allow characters to just go about their day and like nothing bad ever happens. And if there's a war involved, which there had to be, there's going to be a lot of violence because that's how
Yeah.
war works. I didn't enjoy having to come up with all of that violence, and I tried to get it over very quickly because I don't want to see it, and I really hoped that my reader wouldn't want to see it, which is part of why I kind of turned to them at that moment to scold them a little bit.
I mean, I felt you present in. I don't like at all, like morphing the
Right, right.
author into characters, but I did feel you in the that kind of multiple role played moment where Yara has to kill Dominic
Mhm.
to satisfy God again and again and again, and her
Yeah.
revulsion, their revulsion at it,
Mhm.
their sense that it was doing something harmful to them as much as it was to Dominic made me feel like I was getting a sense of you.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that that didn't feel like it took you out of the work at all.
Oh no, not at all. But there are moments in any book where I feel
Yeah.
resonant with the author, and that was one where I was like, oh, there's a deep well here.
Right. Well, hopefully. And I think that like it's impossible for me not to be a part of the narrator. I'd like to think of them as their own character, right? And that there's a sort of muse giving us this epic tale. But I'm absolutely there. And the things that I care about exist in the book. And I'm sure that there are things I could care about, but don't yet, that don't make it into the book, right? So
Yeah.
I have I have trouble with violence towards animals more than I do with people in like movies or in books. And so there's a few moments where I sort of question that as well. Like what
Yeah.
there's a moment where all the horses seem to have names, but none of the soldiers do. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
just me sort of scolding myself, but allowing it to stay in the book. Um,
Mm.
and trying to sort of deal with what that means about like my understanding of the world and what is worthy of like safety and like who do I care about?
Mm.
And I'm still grappling with that, but I
Yeah.
did want to stay in the book.
What is worthy of safety is a really nice way of putting that. Yara and Adrena are on a collision course to meet on a battlefield, one ordained by God, the other self ordained. Both flee traumas and uncertainties, with Yara being the unwilling anointed and Adrena seeking to step outside of her mother's prophetess shadow to be her own prophet of God, the God's word. How did these two become your heroes, and what particular things do you love about each of them, and how do those sort of come together as their arcs meet?
Yeah, I cheated a little bit. And the original, like the characters originated from a story in the book of Judges, in which God asks sort of citizen to kill a man, and she does it immediately. And then
Mhm.
she does it in a really gruesome way, and then disappears from the Bible, like never really to be mentioned again. And I was struck by that in my like Bible as literature class when I had to write an essay. I found that story and I was like, "That's ridiculous." And I just like had an obsession with that character because how does one do that as just like a citizen? You're not a soldier. You have not been
Mm.
prepped for this, but just because God says to do this thing, you do it immediately without questioning. Always felt very wild to me, and also I was kind of annoyed that there was no other story about this character. And so the the story of Yara sort of came from that. And then it became like it morphed into its own story. But there was a prophet in the book of Judges, the only woman prophet, I believe. Or no, the only woman judge. But she's also a prophet named Deborah. And she is on a journey to help a character win a war as well. And so I was just interested in these two characters, and they became their own beings as the story progressed. But that's where it sort of started. And so it was nice to have this background to sort of build on top of. And very early on in my writing it, I felt this sort of moment where I wasn't connected to the characters anymore. And my husband suggested to make Yara non-binary because I was sticking too close to the original character from the Bible. And it opened up this whole other world for me. And then it was like impossible to stop writing, which was great. But I originally was writing I originally wrote Yara's journey in most of its entirety before even starting on Adrena's journey.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know.
I would not have guessed that.
I mean, I definitely went back and did a lot of revisions over and over and over again. But I was just like, I got to get this first journey out of the way. And then I was like, okay, but we can't just have like half of a book about one character and half of a book about the other. We're going to have to weave in their journeys. And so that took a very long time. And I like to chalk it up to this being my first novel. Like I'm still learning how to do these things. But yeah, for a while it was just Yara.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'm glad to know the germ of each of the characters coming in. And that's not cheating. I think that's just that's just finding fascinating characters and having them live longer and different lives in your world.
Absolutely. I was like, they deserved to have a journey to, even if they have to do this gruesome thing, I would like to see how they did it, like how they came to become the person that could do that gruesome thing.
Hey, I like your new RAV4.
Thanks, yours too.
What does RAV stand for anyway?
To me, it's the Remarkably Advanced Vehicle.
Really? To me, it's the Runway Approved Vehicle for its amazing style.
What about Remarkably Adaptable Vehicle because of its versatile cargo space?
Or Really Admired Vehicle?
Oh, or Really Awesome Vehicle.
It really is the recreational activity vehicle. The stylish 2026 Toyota RAV4 Limited. What's your RAV4?
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? All right. Bring a date, your team, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
Despite the august intertexts that line the walls of Canon, I would call this a comedy in the classical sense, a story about ordinary people, but in this case with a veneer of the extraordinary. And it is absolutely a comedy in the modern sense of a text that employs humor to reveal truths. I was so delighted and did so much laughing aloud when I read Canon. And there's just not many books that make me do that because I've read so much that often I'm not surprised by a kind of humor unless the voice is really distinct. And I think you've done something amazing here with the humor. But, you know, some of my favorites are God judging a bodybuilding competition because, quote, most of the world lacked definition, but here, that's such a great turn of phrase. The fact that our whale character was Jacques Cousteau in a former life. And it just, you know, I could go on and on until everyone would be bored of me talking about how much I found to be really funny in this.
No, I think you should just keep going. All the things that are funny. And then I'll make sure to like really hit hard on those when I have to do readings. I'll be like,
well, this is
funny sections.
You've got a lot to choose from for your readings. But I want to know how you found, I mean, as I honestly, to tell the truth, I have not read your poetry. So I don't know if you're a very funny poet, but I wonder how this comedic voice in your writing emerged. And what do you see comedy as doing in canon?
Yeah, no, I can't really tell you if I'm a funny poet. It just seems like I'm not allowed to say if I'm funny or not. But I remember early on, like very early on, because it was my husband and I drove to New Orleans from Florida to do a reading that was like for free, you know?
Mm.
Um, and I remember reading at it, and then a guy came up to me afterwards and he just like looked at me. He's like, you're really funny, right? I was just like, right? And he's like, but do you know? And I'm like, why are you doing this? And so
How
uh,
does one even answer that?
I know. I was like, I can't really respond to that, but I hope that means you liked what I read. But it was, I don't know that it was ever like super intentional to become funny when I first started writing. I think that if anything, my earliest poems were attempts at like there was an attempt of a punchline because I didn't understand how poetry worked at the time. I was like, okay, well, I don't have that much room to do anything, so let's just like do a joke and see how that goes. And it didn't go well. And so then I realized I had to start reading a lot more poetry to understand how poetry worked. But there's this, and I've always, I mean, like anyone, I love comedy and love comedians. But there's this amazing quote by the comedian Richard Pryor that my husband and I bring up all the time because he says that he likes to get the audience laughing so that their mouths are open when he pours the poison in.
Oh, wow.
Which
Oh
is
my
so
goodness.
good. And
That's
I'm like,
so good.
I would love it if I could just like scratch his name off and be like, that's mine. I said
Yeah,
that
yeah.
first.
Well, Richard Pryor's brilliance is often
Yeah,
undersold,
it
but
is. It's
he just had
ridiculous.
so many things like that. I haven't heard that one though. I love it.
Isn't it good? And so I like to think of that. I mean, I got that quote way after starting to write, but I want to be like, that is the quote that started me on my writing journey. But I think that there's so much sad stuff or hard stuff to talk about in my work, in my poetry, or in hopefully canon that I feel I need to almost trick the reader into engaging with it. And the trick that I know is humor so far. And maybe eventually I'll learn other tricks, but I feel like I do have to sort of get the readers to let their guard down so that I can like get the poison in.
Get the poison. Yeah, that's
Here's this funny, like, snarky moment, and also here's a lot of death and ecological
Mm,
collapse, and
mm,
gotta
mm.
hold on to both of these things, but here's another joke. Sorry. And so, yeah, I think that it I think part of it came from just growing up watching The Simpsons, and so just always being really interested in
Love that.
it's so good, and also there's so much slapstick, like, you can watch it as a kid and think it's really funny because someone got knocked over, and you can watch it as an adult, and you think it's funny because they are doing a weird reference to Glenn Gould, and now you think that's funny because you're an adult who likes Glenn Gould. And so I think that so much of, like, the use of, like, a lot of references and allusions and all of that almost certainly comes from being a big fan of shows like The Simpsons or
Mm.
just comedians who really have to think about the space and time that they have to make an audience member think. And so
Well,
why
I
did you
like it even more thinking of it as Simpsons refracting. You've just brought up ecological collapse, and
Yeah.
that makes me think of our whale, whose name
Yeah.
wonderfully is "How big!" exclamation point. And they, along with Newt, the truth-revealing Newt,
Yeah.
represent some of the animal life that lives powerfully in this story of human violence. And there are very upsetting scenes of islands of trash and trash literally affixed to how big's body
Mhm.
and so I was interested to hear you talk a little bit more about bringing in animal lives and giving them weight and importance in a moment within canon of ecological collapse.
Yeah. Well, I look really closely at animals. I'm sure I make them uncomfortable, because I really just want to see them doing animal stuff in the wild. And sometimes I attribute like human characteristics to those things. Like I've got this chipmunk that sits on my back patio in the morning, like as the sun is rising. And he stares out toward the backyard. And I like to think of him believing that that yard is his, and like he's just kind of like surveying his kingdom. He does it every morning, and I love it so much, and it's like one of my favorite things to wake up to.
I think that has to be true. Let's
What else
just say
could
it
it
is.
be? And so I think that I've just always been very, very, one of my like really early memories is being in like kindergarten, which I guess isn't that early, but every time we would have to go outside to run the track, I would end up finding like a bug in the middle of the track, and then I would just crouch down and put my hands around it so that no one would step on the bug. And so, and then I would be like the last one done with track. But it's just like I want to be able to prevent harm from happening to animals, even as just one person. And sometimes that prevention could be a disruption to that animal's like life, or I might get it wrong, but I'm very like, I feel like I have to at least try. And so it's also really hard to pay attention to like the loss of animal lives. Like just even on the internet, you see videos of like what the Great Garbage Patch looks like, or all of the trash going through rivers, or fertilizers that kill hundreds of thousands of fish because they ran into the water. The fertilizer did, not the fish. But like, and I remember it happened really recently over here in Iowa, where there was like a spill of fertilizer, and all of the like 700,000 fish at least died. And then in the article I was reading, they're like, the turtles haven't surfaced from like hibernation yet, so we don't know what will happen to them.
God.
And that was so hard. Like I was like already dealing with the fish, and then I have to think about like what it means to like wake up into death. And it's really hard for me to forget those things once I learn them, and it can be really like paralyzing to just try to hold on to all of the harms that humans are causing to animals at like any given moment. And I didn't want necessarily for Canon to do the same thing, to like sort of keep people from getting out of bed, because it feels so
Thank
hopeful.
you for that.
Yeah. And so I feel like there's a universe in which I wrote this without any animal being harmed at all, which wouldn't have felt real, or at least it wouldn't have accomplished what, I guess I don't know what I wanted to accomplish, but it wouldn't have felt true to the world of Canon. And I think that, yeah, I think that it's something that I grapple with every day, because it feels very, very difficult to be one person trying to do anything to prevent harm to animals. But I know that there are people that are doing a lot of work. Like there's the what is it called? There's like a whole system set up now for blocking trash from running out of rivers into the ocean. Which is really great, right? And it started with one person wanting to figure out how to stop trash from getting into the ocean, and then they just like built it up from there. And there are people that have like farms that they run just to keep like pigs who have fallen off of like trucks headed for slaughter, and then they just take care of them forever, right? Like just like rescues like that are so important for me as a person to see, because I know that there's like a way to help, even if it's not like stopping or reversing ecological collapse.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's again, it would just be impossible to do anything if we thought we had to do that all at once. But it is really helpful to see people that care. And so I think that one thing about Yara is that they're a very passive character at the start of the book. And there's a way in which the caring doesn't necessarily mean helping, just means that they see what is happening and don't feel like they can do much to stop it. But hopefully, as the story goes on, they get a little bit more agency or they feel a little bit more active. But who knows?
Well, I will be hopeful that is the case.
That was really long rambling of me just being sad about the Earth in this moment. But
Not rambly at all, and definitely worthy of our thinking. I wanted to wrap back around to what you had just recently said about making Yara non-binary and finding that to be a kind of real opening and of energy and connection. And as I was finishing Canon last week, I became increasingly interested in how Yara's non-binariness was a key to understanding the novel's refusal to be one thing. Is it an epic, religious canon until it blasphemes a hero story until the nature of heroism comes very much into question? And I wonder if you felt that or have come to think of the non-binariness of a character as non-binariness of a novel form.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that genre has always been something that troubled me because, again, I would love to have control over things, but it seemed that anytime I would learn the rules to a genre, I would see an author celebrated who broke those rules.
Yeah.
Well, then what does it mean to be called an epic or to be known as like a horror or like a gothic horror, right? I think genre has always frustrated me in those in as a writer it's frustrated me, but also as a teacher of writing because I teach like sci-fi classes or I teach dystopia classes and I go through the rules. I go through the sort of elements of a genre, and then I show them a bunch of authors who break those rules, and I'm like, follow the rules. But
I just interviewed Deb Olin Unferth, and her most recent novel, Earth 7, is so magnificent at breaking all the rules all the time until you wonder, well, were there any rules to begin with?
Amazing. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it would be so nice for my brain if everything fit perfectly into little categories, but they don't. And I thought it would be really fun to not try to force this book to being one thing or another thing. And so it is an epic. I still think of it as poetry, but it's also a novel. And I think that that's fine. I think that there's a way in which there aren't really binaries when it comes to like what a book can be or what a human can be. And so it just made sense to me to call this book, like to have that sort of subtitle be that it's a non-binary epic.
Lovely. Before I let you go, Paige, I would love to know.
You will let me go?
Yeah, I know.
For much longer than this.
I have so much more to say and talk about, but I don't want to, eat all your day's time. And so I'm dying to know what you've been reading and loving recently, and if you'd recommend some things for us.
Oh, absolutely. So I feel lucky to get to read some books before they officially come out. And so a book that I read recently is by the writer Tom Lin, and it's called Babylon, South Dakota. And
it's sitting on my on my shelf right there,
amazing.
and it's.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't yet, but I'm excited to.
It's really good, and it's such an interesting story about you expect it to be wedded to realism. It's about a Chinese American family settling down in South Dakota, and then a nuclear sort of facility is built right near their house, and then some weird stuff happens. It's so great, and it also has a dog in it that can't die.
Oh,
so,
that's your kind of dog.
Exactly. So I was like, this is my kind of story. Highly recommended. It comes out May 26th, so soon.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I'm going to try and interview him.
You got it ahead of time, so you get to feel really special about that.
It's my favorite thing to feel special about.
Yeah. And then there is a book coming out in October, and it's Layli Long Soldier's second full-length collection of poems. And it's just called We, like W-E. And it has been so delightful to read. Her first book, Whereas, was a really big deal in the poetry world, and I think beyond the poetry world. And so everyone's kind of been waiting with bated breath for whatever Layli was going to do next. And it is...
I'm looking at the cover, and it looks
it's so good.
So beautiful.
I know. And so that has been something I've been moving kind of slowly through because I want to savor my time with it. And so those are two books that would highly recommend to any reader, even if you don't think you like poetry.
And I feel like part of my hope for this podcast is that people who feel like they maybe don't like poetry or any genre will just, open themselves up to the particularity of certain works. And this one sounds great. I'm excited myself to read Babylon, South Dakota, but I can't emphasize enough how much everyone needs to run out and buy Canon by Paige Lewis, a non-binary epic that does more than you could imagine a single book doing with its poetic voice, its turn to so many texts that drive and light our imagination while being something entirely of itself. And it was such a pleasure to get you on the show and be able to talk about it, Paige.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a delight to talk with you, even though everything you said was so smart and great. And I think that there is a way in which you could clip out everything that I've said.
That is so not true.
And it could just be you talking about it, and sort of the questions that you ask could just be for like the listener to think about. But no, I really appreciate how much time and energy you spent on this book, because I feel like you get it, and that means a lot.
Well, I thank you for saying that, but it is a book that has a hospitality about it that draws you in, and I found it entirely encapsulating, and I'm so glad to know it. And so thanks again, Paige, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk again soon.
Of course.
Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Paige Lewis for coming on to talk about their debut novel, Canon. You can find links to purchase Canon and all of Paige's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, and now YouTube, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Burned by Books.